How many people went with Jacob down into Egypt? Now, most people, when they're reading the Bible, they read this passage here in Genesis 46. This is verses 26 and 27. All the souls that came with Jacob into Egypt, which came out of his loins, besides Jacob's sons' wives, all the souls were 66, meaning 66. Then it says, and the sons of Joseph, which were born him in Egypt, were 2 souls. All the souls of the house of Jacob, which came into Egypt, were 70. Now, a score is 20, 60 is 60, plus 10 is 70. So, 70 people went down into Egypt with Jacob. At least that is what most people think. But let us examine this just a little bit. First of all, it says, which came out of his loins, besides Jacob's sons' wives. So right here, we already know that they're not listing his the wives of his sons. That's at least 12 people right there, because he had 12 sons. And some of them probably had more than one wife. So you have to add in their wives. 70 plus 12 is 82. Probably a few multiple wives in there. Closer to 90 right there. Just from that passage, we know it's more than 70. But let us consider what Jacob was, who he was. Let us step back actually and see what his grandfather was, Abraham. In Genesis chapter 14, verse 14, we read about Lot has just been captured in the battle of the kings when the kings of the east came and conquered Sodom. And it says here in verse 14, and when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. Born in his own house, 318 trained servants, meaning these were professional soldiers. These were his servants that were trained for battle. And they were born, all of them, in his house. But he didn't have 318 sons. He had 8 sons. He had Ishmael by Hagar, Isaac by Sarah, and then he had 6 more sons with his third wife, Keturah. Not 318. These were the servants. See, Abraham was a nomadic prince, in a sense. He was a patriarch over a large tribe of people. He had his herdsmen, he had his servants, he had his actual family. And at one point he even has his head steward. Abraham asked God to let his head steward's son, or let his head steward inherit his birthright, because he had no sons of his own. So Abraham is this great household. Isaac inherits all of that, or most of that. His other sons get some gifts, but most of it, the bulk of it, is inherited by Isaac, who has the birthright. And after Isaac inherits it, he expands it, he makes it bigger. And when Isaac dies, Jacob inherits it as the patriarch, as the next holder of the birthright. All of these great holdings. And he adds to it everything that he has gotten. We know he got lots of herds and servants while he was working for his father-in-law, because he gave presents to Esau of a couple hundred various types of cattle. So he had a great household. By the time they go into Egypt, all of his sons are married with their own households. And he didn't just take his sons and his grandsons with him and leave everybody else back in Canaan. No, he brought his tribe. Because we also understand that from Abraham down to Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, these 3 men, they did not own land. They were nomadic people who traveled around, and they constantly talk about them sojourning, meaning they would go into a land, and they would stay there for a little while, and let their flocks graze and everything, and then they'd move on to another place. And that's how they worked. That's how it was. They were constantly moving around. So he wouldn't have left anybody back in Canaan. They would have all come down with him into Egypt. So how many people came into Egypt? Well, it's not the 70. We know I mean, the verse by itself tells us there were more than that, because they would have brought their wives. But they would have brought all of their servants, all of their flocks and herds, all of their herdsmen, all of these things. So we don't really know how many people went down into Egypt with Jacob. We know that there were 70 that were direct blood relatives of Jacob. But I think he most likely brought several hundred. I think a minimum estimate, in my opinion, would be somewhere around 400 people that actually came down into Egypt with Jacob. That's why they're given the whole land of Goshen to settle in. If it was just 70 people, they wouldn't be given an entire land. They would be given a small portion of that land. But no, they're given an entire land to settle in because there are several hundred. They're bringing a large tribe down into Egypt to settle. So the Bible does not actually tell us how many people went down into Egypt with Jacob. But from the information we have, we know there had to be several hundred.